Picture this. A young Hebrew slave stands before the most powerful king in the world, interpreting dreams that Egypt's wisest men couldn't understand. Pharaoh is so amazed that he takes off his own royal ring and places it on this prisoner's finger, declaring him the second most powerful person in all of Egypt. One moment he's locked in a dungeon, forgotten and alone. The next, he's riding in Pharaoh's chariot while everyone bows before him. This is one of the most jaw-dropping rags-to-riches stories ever told. But how did we get here? How does a prisoner become a prince? Let's find out. Today we're diving into the incredible story of Joseph, a tale of jealousy, betrayal, patience, and a divine plan that nobody saw coming. Buckle up, because this journey takes us from family drama to Egyptian palaces, and it's going to blow your mind. Our story begins in Canaan, where a man named Jacob had 12 sons. But Jacob loved one son more than all the others, Joseph. And guess what? Jacob didn't even try to hide it. He made Joseph a beautiful coat of many colors, a special gift that screamed, "You're my favorite!" Now imagine you're one of Joseph's older brothers, working hard in the hot sun every single day, and your little brother gets this amazing coat while you get nothing. Joseph's brothers were not happy. But here's where things get even more complicated. Joseph started having dreams. Not regular dreams, but dreams from God. In one dream, Joseph and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field. And suddenly, Joseph's sheaf stood up tall while his brothers' sheaves bowed down to it. Joseph thought, "Wow, what an interesting dream. I should definitely tell my brothers about this." When he told them, his brothers' faces turned red with anger. They shouted, "Are you saying you're going to rule over us?" Then Joseph had another dream. This time, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were all bowing down to him. He told his brothers and his father this time. Even Jacob was puzzled and said, "What? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually bow down to you?" The brothers' jealousy burned hotter than the desert sun. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were taking care of the sheep far from home. Joseph, wearing his beautiful, colorful coat, set off on his journey. When the brothers saw Joseph coming from a distance, something dark stirred in their hearts. They sneered, "Here comes that dreamer." And right there, they plotted to kill him. They said, "Let's throw him in this pit and tell Father that a wild animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, the oldest brother, convinced them not to kill Joseph. Just throw him in an empty pit instead. The brothers agreed. When Joseph arrived, they ripped off his beautiful coat and threw him into a deep, dry well. Can you imagine? One moment Joseph is walking confidently to see his brothers. The next, he's at the bottom of a dark pit, crying out for help, while his own brothers sit down to eat their lunch as if nothing happened. Then they spotted a caravan of traders heading to Egypt. Judah had an idea. He said, "Why don't we sell Joseph as a slave instead? That way we don't have his blood on our hands." So they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. Joseph, the favorite son with the beautiful coat and big dreams, was dragged away in chains to Egypt, a foreign land where he knew no one. The brothers took Joseph's coat, dipped it in goat's blood, and brought it to their father. Jacob believed his beloved son had been killed by a wild animal, and he wept bitterly. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Now, Joseph could have given up. He could have been angry and bitter. But instead, Joseph worked hard and trusted God. God was with Joseph, and everything Joseph did succeeded. Potiphar noticed this and put Joseph in charge of his entire household. Joseph became the manager of everything Potiphar owned. But then, trouble struck again. Potiphar's wife liked Joseph and wanted him to do something wrong. Day after day, she tried to get him to betray his master, but Joseph refused. He said, "How can I do this wicked thing and sin against God?" One day she grabbed his cloak, but Joseph ran out of the house so fast he left his cloak behind. Furious at being rejected, Potiphar's wife lied and accused Joseph of attacking her. Potiphar was enraged and threw Joseph into prison, the royal prison where the king's prisoners were kept. Joseph went from slave to prison, from bad to worse. But here's the amazing thing. Even in prison, God was with Joseph. In prison, Joseph met Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, who were both thrown in jail after angering the king. One night, both men had strange dreams that troubled them. Joseph noticed their sad faces and asked what was wrong. When they explained their dreams, Joseph said, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer went first and said, "I saw a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and produced grapes. I squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and gave it to him." Joseph smiled and said, "The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position." Then Joseph made a request. He said, "When things go well with you, please remember me and mention me to Pharaoh. Get me out of this prison. I was kidnapped from my homeland and I've done nothing wrong here." The cupbearer promised he would. But when the baker heard the good interpretation, he eagerly shared his dream too. Joseph's face grew serious. He said, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree." 3 days later, everything happened exactly as Joseph said. It was Pharaoh's birthday, and he restored the cupbearer to his position, but executed the baker. Now surely the cupbearer would remember Joseph and tell Pharaoh about him, right? Nope. The cupbearer forgot all about Joseph. 2 whole years passed, and Joseph remained in prison. Then one night, Pharaoh had 2 disturbing dreams. In the first dream, 7 healthy, fat cows came up from the Nile River, followed by 7 ugly, skinny cows that ate the fat cows. In the second dream, 7 plump heads of grain were swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh woke up troubled. He called all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but nobody could tell him what the dreams meant. Suddenly, the cupbearer's memory clicked. He told Pharaoh, "Oh no! I just remembered something. When I was in prison, there was a young Hebrew man who could interpret dreams, and everything he said came true." Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. Guards rushed to the prison, and Joseph was quickly cleaned up and brought before the king. Pharaoh said, "I've heard you can interpret dreams." Joseph boldly replied, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he needs." Pharaoh told Joseph both dreams, and God gave Joseph the interpretation right away. Joseph explained, "Both dreams mean the same thing." The 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain represent 7 years of great abundance coming to Egypt. The 7 bad cows and 7 bad heads of grain represent 7 years of terrible famine that will follow. God is showing you what he's about to do. Then Joseph gave Pharaoh some wise advice. He said, "You should find a wise man and put him in charge of storing up grain during the good years, so Egypt will survive the famine." Pharaoh looked at Joseph with amazement and said, "Can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God?" He turned to Joseph and declared, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people will obey your orders. Only I will be greater than you." Pharaoh took his signet ring off his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen robes and put a gold chain around his neck. Joseph rode in Pharaoh's second chariot, and people shouted, "Bow down!" wherever he went. Joseph was 30 years old. 13 years had passed since his brothers threw him in that pit. But God had been with him every single step of the way. Just as Joseph predicted, 7 years of abundance came. Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, storing up enormous amounts of grain, like sand on the seashore. Then the 7 years of famine began, and people from all nations came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph. The famine reached Canaan too. Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt and sent 10 of his sons to buy food. But he kept Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, at home because he was afraid something might happen to him. When Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt, they bowed down before the Egyptian ruler with their faces to the ground, just like Joseph's childhood dream. They didn't recognize Joseph at all. He was dressed like an Egyptian, spoke Egyptian, and looked like a powerful prince. But Joseph recognized them immediately. Joseph tested his brothers to see if they had changed. He accused them of being spies and demanded they bring their youngest brother Benjamin to prove their story. Joseph kept Simeon as a hostage while the others returned home. When they came back with Benjamin, Joseph could barely control his emotions. During a feast, he gave Benjamin 5 times as much food as anyone else. Then he secretly placed his silver cup in Benjamin's grain sack. After they left, Joseph sent his guards to catch them and accuse Benjamin of stealing. The brothers were devastated. They tore their clothes in grief and returned to Joseph, begging him to take them as slaves instead of Benjamin. Judah, the same brother who had suggested selling Joseph years ago, stepped forward and offered to become a slave in Benjamin's place. He pleaded, "Please let me stay instead of the boy. How can I go back to my father if the boy isn't with me?" This was the moment Joseph had been waiting for. His brothers had changed. Joseph couldn't hold back any longer. He sent all the Egyptian servants out of the room and burst into tears so loud that people outside could hear him. He cried out, "I am Joseph! Is my father still alive?" His brothers stood frozen in terror. They couldn't speak. The powerful ruler before them. Was Joseph? Joseph said gently, "Come close to me. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. But don't be distressed or angry with yourselves. It was not you who sent me here, but God. God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. This famine will last 5 more years, but God positioned me here to save many lives, including yours." Then Joseph hugged Benjamin and wept. He kissed all his brothers and wept over them, and finally, his brothers could talk with him. Joseph sent wagons loaded with gifts back to Canaan to bring his entire family to Egypt. When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive and ruler of Egypt, his heart nearly stopped. He said, "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go see him before I die." Jacob's whole family, 70 people total, moved to Egypt, where Joseph provided for them during the famine. The family was reunited, and God's plan was fulfilled. Wow, what an incredible journey, my little adventurers. So what can we learn from Joseph's amazing story? First, even when bad things happen, God has a plan. Joseph spent years as a slave and prisoner, but God was preparing him for something greater. When tough times come, remember that God sees the bigger picture. Second, stay faithful to God no matter where you are. Joseph honored God in Potiphar's house, in prison, and in the palace. Whether you're at school, at home, or with friends, live in a way that makes God proud. Third, forgiveness is powerful. Joseph had every reason to be angry with his brothers, but instead he forgave them and saved their lives. When someone hurts you, choose forgiveness. It sets you free. Joseph's story reminds us of these beautiful words from Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." If you love this story, smash that like button. Subscribe for more amazing Bible adventures. I'll see you in the next adventure. Remember, God has an amazing plan for your life too.